Wisdom, the final frontier to true knowledge. Welcome to Wisdom Trek, where our mission is to create a legacy of wisdom, to seek out discernment and insights, to boldly grow where few have chosen to grow before. Hello, my friend. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, your captain on our journey to increase wisdom and create a living legacy. Thank you for joining us today as we explore wisdom on our second millennium podcast. This is day 1346 of our trek, and it is Worldview Wednesday. Creating a biblical worldview is essential to have a proper perspective on today's current events. To establish a biblical worldview, you must have a proper understanding of God and His Word. Our focus for these several months on Worldview Wednesday is mastering the Bible through a series of brief insights. These insights are extracted from a book by the same title from one of today's most prominent Hebrew scholars, Dr. Micheal S. Heiser. This book is a collection of insights designed to help you to understand the Bible better. When we let the Bible be what it is, we can understand it as the original readers did and as the original writers intended. Each week we'll explore two additional insights. So today's topic is Mastering the Bible, Messianic Prophecy. Insight number 47. The servant of Isaiah is both an individual and the collective nation of Israel. We immediately think of the Messiah at the mention of the servant in the book of Isaiah. This is natural, since the one whom the prophet said would be led like a lamb to the slaughter, Isaiah chapter 53:7, and have our sins placed on him, Isaiah chapter 53:6, is called God's servant twice, Isaiah 52 verse 13 and 53 verse 11. But the servant of Isaiah is often not an individual messianic figure. In several passages, Israel is the servant. For example, in Isaiah chapter 41 verse 8, God speaks, "But as for you, Israel, my servant, Jacob, my chosen one, descended from Abraham, my friend." But in the very next chapter, God sends a servant to the nation of Israel, Isaiah chapter 42:1 and verses 18 through 25. Then the prophet moves back to the more corporate servant of Israel in the chapters that immediately follow. Let me read several verses as an example. Isaiah chapter 44 verses 1 and 2. "But now listen to me, Jacob, my servant, Israel, my chosen one, the Lord who made you and helps you stay. Do not be afraid, O Jacob, O dear Israel, my chosen one." And then Isaiah 44 verse 21. "Pay attention, O Jacob, for you are my servant, O Israel. I, the Lord, made you and will not forget you." And then Isaiah chapter 45 verse 4. "And why have I called you for this work? Why did I call you by name when you did not know me? It is for the sake of Jacob, my servant, Israel, my chosen one." And then in Isaiah chapter 49 verse 3. "He said to me, you are my servant, Israel, you will bring me glory." Oddly enough, the final reference sets up the transition back to an individual servant whom God sends to Israel in Isaiah chapter 49 verse 5. "And now the Lord speaks, the one who formed me in my mother's womb, to be his servant, who commissioned me to bring Israel back to him. The Lord has honored me, and my God has given me strength." Why this back and forth? Can't Isaiah make up his mind? There is a good reason both portraits are in Isaiah. Throughout the Old Testament, the nation was represented by a single individual and by language describing a single figure. Israel is called God's son, Exodus chapter 4 verses 22 and 23. Later, the king of Israel is called God's son, Psalms chapter 2 verse 7. King David was called God's servant, Psalm chapter 89 verse 3 and verse 20. This royal son of God was, of course, from the line of David, the line that would produce the Messiah, Jesus, God's son, John 3:16. The logic here is that Israel was supposed to be God's offspring or his son through Abraham. Israel was supposed to be above all the nations since her king was above all kings, Psalm chapter 89 verse 27. Israel failed, and so God had to accomplish his plan himself. He would come as a man to fulfill his role as son, servant, Messiah, and king. The back and forth portraits show us how God knew all along that he would have to fulfill his own expectations to redeem humanity. Next, let's move on to insight number 48. Messianic prophecy was deliberately cryptic. Have you ever wondered how the disciples never seemed to understand the things that Jesus told them about himself? Think about it. When Jesus told them that it was time for him to go to Jerusalem and die, it angered and scared them. Matthew chapter 17, verse 22 and 23, and Mark chapter 9, verses 30 through 32. No one replied, "That's right, I read that in the scriptures." Peter even rebuked Jesus for saying such a thing in Matthew chapter 16, verses 21 through 23. The truth is that the disciples had little sense of what was really going on. Even after the resurrection, their minds had to be supernaturally enabled to get this message. Luke chapter 24, verses 44 and 45. We shouldn't be too hard on the disciples. They weren't dumb individuals. Their ignorance was the result of God's deliberate plan to conceal the Messianic prophecy. Paul talked about the need for that in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 7 and 8. Let me read that. No, the wisdom we speak of is the mystery of God, his plan that was previously hidden, even though he made it for our ultimate glory before the world began. But the rulers of this world have not understood it. If they had, they would have not crucified our glorious Lord. If Satan and the powers of darkness had known that instigating people to kill the Messiah was part of God's design to accomplish his own doom, they would have never done it. The Gospels are clear that Satan and his demons knew that the prophesied Son of David had come. Matthew chapter 8, verses 28 and 29, and Luke chapter 4, verses 31 through 35. The Old Testament was clear that it would happen at some point, but what was concealed was the plan of redemption. Let's take Isaiah chapter 53 as an example. It is clear that God's servant would suffer for sin, but the Hebrew word translated Messiah, that is Mashiach, never occurs in this passage. It occurs only once in all of Isaiah, and even then, it is used of Cyrus, a pagan king. The word does not occur in Jeremiah or Ezekiel, and is only found once in the minor prophets, in Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 13, where it speaks of the nation. The occurrence in Psalm refers only to Israel's king. Only a handful of them are quoted in the New Testament authors of a Messianic king, and their application only becomes apparent after Jesus' death and resurrection. The label, Son of God, isn't helpful, since Israel is called God's son in Exodus chapter 4, verses 22 and 23, and the kings like David also had that title. As shocking as it sounds, there isn't a single verse in the Old Testament that refers to a suffering Messiah who would be God's incarnate, die, and rise again, and that is deliberate. What we do get in the Old Testament are all the pieces of the profile, scattered in dozens and even hundreds of places. This portrait can only be discerned after the fact. The plan of salvation was a cosmic chess game that had to be won. The rest of prophecy unfolds in the same way, in fulfillments hidden in plain sight. And that will conclude this week's lesson on another 2 insights from Dr. Heiser's book, Mastering the Bible. Next Worldview Wednesday, we will continue with 2 additional insights. I believe that you'll find each Worldview Wednesday an interesting topic to consider as we build our biblical worldview. Tomorrow, we will continue with our 3-minute humor nugget that will provide you with a bit of cheer, which will help you to lighten up and live a rich and satisfying life. So encourage your friends and family to join us and to come along with us tomorrow for another day of Wisdom Trek, Creating a Legacy. If you'd like to listen to any of the past 1,345 treks or read the Wisdom Journals, they are all available at wisdom-trek.com. And I encourage you to subscribe to Wisdom Trek on your favorite podcast player so that each day's trek will be downloaded to you automatically. And thank you so much for allowing me to be your guide, your mentor, but most importantly, I am your friend as I serve you through the Wisdom Trek podcast and journal each day. And as we take this trek of life together, let us always live abundantly, love unconditionally, listen intentionally, learn continuously, lend to others generously, lead with integrity, and then leave a living legacy each day. I am Guthrie Chamberlain, reminding you to keep moving forward. Enjoy your journey, and And then create a great day every day. See you tomorrow.